what I would like to do is start off by asking each of you to describe your business or organization. And then obviously in the case of, your business, both buying and or selling directly or have some type of distribution center in play, to kind of explain that from your own organization's perspective. So Tom, do you mind starting off with that?
Sure. We have a pretty interesting business model. We're a family farm for 35 years. In the last 7 years, we've actually been a nonprofit and taking the production agriculture part of the farm and using it as a training center and doing some crop development and a number of different crops. Strawberries is 10% of our fruit program. We're a bit unusual probably in Northwest Washington, where we start 1st of June harvesting strawberries and cherries. We work through quite a number of tree fruits and day neutral strawberries into the fall. So unique in that sense. All our products are farmers markets or wholesale. We have a pack, a cooler. We grow a lot of tree fruits. We have a lot of space, so there's always room to chill strawberries as quickly as we possibly can. We sell we have a full-time marketer marketing our products through the growing season. We are also a member, as Rob's organization, with the Puget Sound Food Hub, and move a lot of product through that into the Seattle market. It seems like I'm missing one thing. Or are we good?
That basically, for now, we can leave it at that, and then I know there'll be other questions that'll be building on it.
Yeah, so so I'm the operations director at Viva Farms, and we're located in Mount Vernon. And Viva Farms primarily is a farm incubator program, so we help connect growers who want to start farm businesses with the necessary resources, cold storage, some shared equipment, land, and a marketing program as well. So for folks that, some of our folks have been working in agriculture a long time as farm workers, and they want to transition to farm ownership. And some folks are coming at it from different backgrounds. But so yes, we've got 88 acres in Skagit Valley, and of that, probably about 15 acres are in berries right now. And growers primarily focus on strawberries, raspberries, some blackberries. And part of our program, as I mentioned, is marketing support. So Viva Farms is a buyer of some of the growers' product. And then we also are marketing under the Viva Farms label and doing direct distribution into Seattle, Bellingham. We have our own distribution network. And then also, as Tom mentioned, work through the Puget Sound Food Hub. And then a lot of our growers, of all the product grown at Viva, probably about 40%, 45% of it is sold to Viva Farms, and the other product is direct marketed. So growers are doing farmers markets, CSAs, wholesale accounts. So it's kind of another unique model.
Okay. And I may have missed it with Tom, but how many years have there been strawberries within your production?
So Viva Farms was founded in 2009, so since the beginning now.
Okay.
So.
And Tom, how many years?
Same, about 10 years, I believe.
Okay. So again, this is always open to whoever wants to bring up a comment or question or anything like that, but I also have a big list of questions myself. So just raise your hand if you want to put in some input from the audience. One of the questions I have here is, why did you decide to grow fresh market berries? Did you start out with processed, or was it just always, basically why?
The business model we have is we're very diversified, and we start our spring by selling nursery stocks. And so we run a whole gamut of food plant nursery stock that we sell to homeowners and small growers. And as that season wanes in the end of May, beginning of June, we move into strawberries. Largely, we got into it for a cash flow component, and also that there was a market there. We grow sweet cherries in a very large high tunnel or 4-season greenhouse, and they come on 1st of June. And we need more than one crop to sell, so that we've combined those two together as giving us enough production at that time of year to make sense to have crews and marketing and trucks on the road, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think for us at Viva Farms, really, it was a lot of the growers that are participating, have experience in berries. So a lot of folks that have been working in fields in California that are now in this area, they had the experience in strawberry production, so it's something that they were familiar with from a production side, and also just being a high value crop, that it was something that people generally are able to kind of leverage networks to find labor and that sort of stuff. So it was kind of those reasons.
Okay. What do you guys have a typical demand for a very specific type or variety of strawberry, or do you decide your varieties based on what works for your production system and then market it as you're able to?
That's an interesting question. We've run quite a series of variety trials in this 10-year period, and so we have certainly selected varieties that we find work in our situation. Our strawberry production is we farm on the west slope of Sumas Mountain, which is the first foothill outside of Bellingham. And so we're very warm. This last year we had close to 40 days over 90 degrees. And so we're hitting some of those thresholds on growing strawberries in a climate that all of a sudden, 2 out of the last 5 years, we've had things just burn up. We just couldn't get enough water on them. But it's also the only fruit crop we sell that we don't sell by variety. So we grow, we start with some June bears, and many of these that Wendy talked about in the earlier session, Puget Crimson, we still grow some hoods, Tillamook, and there's another one I'm forgetting in that group. And then we have Albion, Seascape, and Sweet Anne. I think Sweet Anne are the 3 we grow. We've been having more trouble with the Sweet Anne, so I think we will limit that. But the Albion and Seascape for us have been pretty comparable.
Yeah, I think similar, where almost all of our berries now are everbearing. I think in the first number of years we did more June-bearing varieties, and people were working with local processors to do that. But the scale that people are doing it on at Viva really kind of requires that premium market, and so we've been able to kind of more focus on fresh market, and just to get that premium makes sense. So that's generally people are doing ever-bearing varieties just to kind of spread it out throughout the year, and labor availability, have more time that they can kind of have people on site.
So what are your production systems like? Do you guys grow in, have any tunnel production? Is it all plasticulture? Are you, basically, do you have irrigation all set up? I mean, what are some of the logistics behind, growing details?
Well, the June bears that we grow, all other processing berries, we have a few markets that really like them early, and they pay us top dollar for them. And so we've continued to keep about 50% of our production there. Up to this point, we have just planted a matted row. We grow all our fruits certified organic. Needless to say, that season of berries, and depending on the summer, can be a big challenge producing organic berries, although we seem to have worked out a management program where we have pretty good success. Everything is drip irrigation underneath it. We do raised beds for the matted systems. There's a lot of fresh market in our county or UPIC where they're just planting right on the ground, no raised bed whatsoever. That works pretty well. I think one of the things we toy around with is how high can we get that bed to make the picking quicker? I mean, I think that's one of the limiting factors that we see at times. The day neutrals are all plastic culture. There's a drip line, 2 rows. It works pretty good. We have, with our tree fruits, we've used liquid fertigation for 30 years now, and went immediately looking at that. Certainly pre-plant fertilizers and before plastic went on. But the fertilizer during the growing season we put on is all through a fertigation system, and have really tried to dial in and target when to put what where, and have had really good luck with that. Been very pleased with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really similar system. What Tom's mentioned, we do all day neutral, so it's all plastic culture, drip, raised beds, and I think similar. We've got some growers that have been experimenting with taller beds as a way to, just improve efficiencies around harvest. But yeah, really similar.
Tom.
How many years do you get out of a plant? And something else there. How many years do you get out of a planting? And there was another point there that I can't remember right now.
June bears we leave in usually 3 to 4 years. I think we run on a lot of variety trials across all our crops, and so it's pretty common for us to go, oh, this one looks better, we're going to shift over quickly. Day neutrals we run on a 2-year program, and have found that managing fertigation the second year, I don't know if Tom Walters is in the room, he had run some trials on 1 and 2-year-old plants and plastic culture, but we've been able to actually come up with a bigger yield in the second year, and really feel the berries are of better quality in that second year than the first. So that really has lowered our costs quite a bit in that regard. Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Let's see. So let's talk about labor a bit. So how do your pickers, how do the pickers get paid? Are they per pound? Are they like hourly? How do you work it into your system to make it work?
Sure. Yeah, generally people, so again, Viva being sort of a unique model, there's all these independent farms that are operating and have their own crews. So there's a little bit of diversity there. But generally it's kind of a combination of people being paid hourly and by volume. So there's kind of, I guess, both, I would say, between what people are doing, and some of it is there's a lot of family networks involved, so it kind of, some of it's even informal type stuff, so it's a pretty big diversity.
Yeah, we're probably not the 2 best farms to have up front here talking about business models, but we pay hourly with our crew. But they're students in a program, and they're so it's just done that way. But I know that I see quite a bit of diversity amongst the market farmers that I know, with particularly with berry production. Some will pay by the pound over and above minimum wage. Some just have a specific wage that they pay. Some pay by volume. So I think that's pretty unique to every farm.
Yeah, I think that's unique in general. I don't think, again, I'm more based in Oregon, but generally, you guys seem to have programs in place and the labor kind of supports those programs as well. So it's, it's definitely catered to, but it's an interesting concept for sure. I think the labor is a huge issue here. And we were talking earlier today that, some coming up with some strategies to raise these beds up, and strategies where labor can pick more
When you look at we're heavily involved in tree fruits, and when you look at the changes that have been made in that industry to just simplify the process, they've increased picking production by more than 100%. I mean, it's just really been remarkable what they've done. So looking at that particular issue, I think is really critical.
Well, actually, maybe I should open this up a little bit. I feel like I did this the last panel too, but still on the lines of labor and with the growers that are represented here, it would be assumed that there's a premium for you to be. Do you believe who thinks that there's a premium for fresh market strawberries and makes it easier for them to afford the labor for those? Anybody agree with that? Hands up. Okay, a couple. Are you able to pay your labor more with that in mind, or is it? I guess most of you guys only pick for fresh market, so it seems like in Oregon, they are able to pay a premium for fresh picking, and are able to, the picking is different. So I think the expectations of the fruit that is picked, is just at a different caliber. So I wanted to talk about the selling side of your business is a little bit more. What are some of the main limiting factors with selling product, either directly to buyers or direct to consumers? But do you guys have a tendency, like top 3 things that are limiting when selling it?
We're not of a huge scale, and we're in the marketplace consistently from all the way through strawberry season with numerous other crops that we sell alongside of that. The strawberries for us have been a black hole. Simply we could grow a lot more.
And so what's your limiting factor to not being able to grow a lot more?
Probably the limiting thing is just the business plan of the organization and the other kinds of things we are trying to do. We are not completely profit driven. Any nonprofit has to be profitable to stay in existence. So we do have some of those very same issues, but we're really trying to provide a diversity. And if I was looking at it, and we were running this as a family farm, it's clearly labor and the challenge of getting labor in that time period, because it's our strawberries are probably scaled so we can stay at a consistent crew through the year, and we've learned over the past that having big blips in labor demands is increasingly more complicated to fill. So really just trying to build a complete production plan that labor can stay reasonably consistent through it. And that's the strawberries fit a very specific niche for us there. And it's a valuable niche, but we'd have to change the rest of the year. We'd have to change other things in the rest of our program to want to grow more strawberries.
So I'll bring it back to the original question for you, Rob, which was, limiting factors of selling or working with buyers for moving your product.
Sure. Yeah. Something that comes to mind, and we kind of touched on it a little bit in the session this morning, but was around the seasonality, right? And with the ever-bearing varieties, and June, July, we could sell a lot more strawberries than we have, but come August, once those other crops come online and people are more interested in stone fruit from Eastern Washington and whatever it is, there's a lot less room on retailers' shelves. And I think that's because a lot of people think that strawberry season is over, at least, whether they think it because they're being told by the retailers or whether they just, whatever. So sort of, I guess, it really would come down to consumer education and retailer education around, hey, strawberries are still available. So that's something every August for like a number of weeks, it's like we're swimming all of a sudden, and that's a big challenge, and something that I think there was discussion this morning around what kind of effort could there be throughout the industry to kind of help build that brand and let people know that there are local strawberries here, not just in June, you know?
So when you talk to the buyers that you work with, do you have these discussions with them, and do they kind of have any feedback that they generally tell you when it comes to answering this type of question or finding a way to, help with the consumer education or awareness, or, having shelf space available? Or do they just are they more closed off about it?
No, I think they are fairly open, but also everyone's really busy. So, I mean, I think like we could be doing a better job of like proactively having those conversations, and we do, but it's just another thing to be like really on top of, and inevitably everyone, it just doesn't, that's why I guess I feel like if there were sort of more of an effort to be able to kind of like quantify how that could benefit the industry, then there'd be a way to kind of put energy in that's not just falling on an individual seller, right? Because it kind of affects everyone, or at least in that world.
Yeah, I think, a big thing in the produce industry and in the markets is seasonality. And it's, I think all of us initially were surprised when we started growing more and more day neutrals that, it's like, they're going to buy peaches. And for us, we see it. I mean, we go from strawberries and peaches, or from strawberries and cherries to strawberries and peaches to strawberries and apples. And we sell strawberries as far into the fall as we have them. But yeah, it gets increasingly more difficult. And I think to some degree, there's resistance in the grocery industry. Diversity is what they love to have. And also in Northwest Washington, there are a lot of raspberries and blueberries that are in the market that are also local products. And so I think that maybe could be as big of an issue at the grocery end as any other competitors.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of give some feedback from, we've had buyer panels in the past. Granted, they were based in Oregon, but we've had Charlie's Produce on a panel, and New Seasons, and a couple other, distributors and buyers like that. And their main thing was, or the majority of the time, it was really, they were really variety specific with their expectations of what they wanted. And some of the varieties never really jived with the grower, right? Like hoods, for example, they're extremely difficult for a grower to, produce and make a decent profit on, versus something that, has come out a little more recently and is just better adapted. So I want to see if it sounds like you here in Washington don't necessarily have as much of a problem with that. But, I wonder if that feedback, obviously we don't have buyers here, but if that feedback would still stand or be a little bit valid.
We see that in all the other fruit crops we grow, but strawberries is the one. And again, we're not selling through the Hagen chain or through Safeway, those kinds of places where they might have some more specific interests. Certainly for many years, we sold tree fruits through Hagen's, and they always had very specific varietals. But we've never really gone there. We don't grow that many strawberries. So it's probably likely. There might be some people in the audience who would have an answer to that.
Does anybody have any input about that in the audience? You might want to chime in. Nope. So let's talk a little bit about cooling of your berries. There was a little bit of a discussion this morning on the berries, that the shelf life of the berries and complications with that, and having consumers almost expecting kind of a California type of shelf life. So it sounds like both of you have cooling systems within your organizations. Can you expand a little bit on that? If there's like a particular cooling process or kind of temperature setup that you go through to cool down berries in stages, and why is that something that you do?
Yeah, personally speaking, I think our cooling setup like it needs work. Like I would actually look to some other growers here potentially that would be able to kind of provide more of their experience. I think for us it works because we're turning product around just so quickly. Like that's the model that we haven't invested in staged cooling systems, though I think that that's something that we would really benefit from. But finding sort of scale appropriate versions of that is hard, and infrastructure challenges. So,
Tom, do you want to add?
Yeah, the June bears are a real challenge here because they just don't hold up. I suppose the good thing there for us is all our June bears, where they're sold, they're picked in the morning, delivered by 9 a.m. So it's obviously this very short, quick turnaround there. I don't have any of that information in the head. We have 2 different farm sites. We grow all our strawberries at the main farm, and part of that is because they're within 700 feet of the cooler, and it's just every hour berries are brought down and put in the cooler to chill, and so we have a very quick turnaround to get those down there. It's not very sophisticated at this point, and I'm not the one who put it together, so I don't remember all the specifics in there in terms of temperatures, but it's really increased our shelf life significantly on stuff.
Okay, I'm going to break this out to the audience too. Who here uses some type of cooling system for their strawberries? So it seems like quite a few of you guys do. Is it something that you have dialed in, do you think, for the most part, or do you feel like that's still an area of kind of concern or education that lies with how you market your berries? Do you have a quick enough turnover? Who has a quick enough turnover for their berries, or feel like they, because we were talking about this morning, in August, there, for day neutrals anyway, there tends to be kind of an overlap or a heavier load of berries. And so I wonder, if the cooling is adequate enough for that, if there'd be a way to kind of extend shelf life and hold the berries for a little longer, because obviously you're using, typically California varieties. So anybody have any?
Cooling's important, but with June berries especially, it's to get them to market, get them to the consumer as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you pull them off the vine, they're going to start dropping. I have basically, it sounds like what you guys got. I got a cool room to pull the berries right in, put them in a cool room, try to keep them around 50 degrees or so, and try to get them to the customer that same day. Anything that's a day old in ours is we put in a process and work towards making a jam out of them.
So that brings up another question. Who here, put your hands up if you do any kind of secondary processing of your fruit? Oh, okay.
This is one of these topics that came up a lot.
Can you use a mic, Tom?
Yeah, I got one right here.
That was a real bottleneck that we found in a lot of the Oregon fresh marketers, especially even the older ones who were doing June bearers, is that they were so used to not cooling or minimal cooling that they wanted to make the jump to the larger market. And this is the bottleneck, and I think it still is for a lot of our growers to be able to expand their production. It has to do with the cold chain and understanding that and changing from the usual practices. So we did quite a bit of work on that for the growers down there.
So we were tying into the process or the secondary processing. So who here does some type of secondary processing with some of their berries? And is it for your own markets typically? And I kind of feel like that's probably plenty on that. Lastly, or one of the other main questions that I had on here for you guys was food safety certifications. What, if any, food safety certifications do you have on your farm? And then how does that like what are the expectations, or what could you see in the future when it comes to food safety regulations coming through the pipeline?
Well, I can't understand why that's such a question to ask here. Yeah, we're GAP certified. That's all we've been asked at this point, just working with one certifiable body. So it's, again, as an education center, everything we do, food safety is one of the foundations of our education program, because it's just become such a big issue. Specifics, I don't know if there's any. I don't think there's much on the strawberry end of things that is any more complicated than any other crop we do.
Yeah. So we also have a GAP certification. And I think something that we do is, we do similar to Cloud Mountain, we're doing a lot of training. In particular, we do bilingual training. So a lot of our folks are primarily Spanish speaking. So we're doing a lot of food safety trainings in the field with our growers. And we've created some bilingual training resources, some videos that are available for our growers and for anyone who wants to see on our website as well. So that's kind of the role that we're playing, but then we also have to kind of maintain that GAP certification on site in our own facilities. Yeah.
So we have a few minutes left. Tom, did you want to?
Actually, Henry was here a little bit before. I don't think he has any more. Henry Beerlink, but he had mentioned to me, and this has to do, I think, with you, Tom, is that you had some ideas or some concept that there might, through the NARF organization, and that there might be a possibility of doing some strawberry work or turn into applications. Just thought it'd be good to get some information.
Sure. It's an idea at this point, or some concepts to explore. NARF is Northwest Ag Research Foundation. It's been in existence for, I believe, 75 years. It was basically the organization that petitioned WSU to build the research center in Mount Vernon just after World War II. It's been largely a Skagit-based organization this entire time. And the purpose or the mission of the organization is basically to provide grower-driven research and generate dollars that come from grower commitments to crops and raise money outside of that and work directly with WSU in terms of funding. We have specific proposals every year that come to the foundation. And agriculture has changed a lot in that 70 years, and NARF, until I took over being president 2 years ago, nothing had really changed in that time. So we've basically been spending 2 years trying to bring the organization, as I like to say, into the 20th century. Which is not that easy to do with a bunch of people who have been on the board for many, many decades, and to create some of those changes. But I do think one of the things we are looking for, because much the concept of NARF was you had different commodity crops, and there was a small fruit committee, there was a potato committee, there's a seed growers, vegetable seed growers committee, there's an organic committee. So there's a plethora of different groups of growers who up to this point has been fairly casual to develop some priorities for that particular crop, research priorities. They meet with scientists. Scientists can't really, they're not going to be funded by us unless they have growers backing their proposals. And so I think the strawberry thing, there is a lot of small growers in Northwest Washington, and probably even some good sized growers out there. And it's in many ways, in the short term, it's as simple of having a grower group of strawberry growers who want to make a commitment to get together once a year, which could even be by email in that regard, and talk about what the issues are and what the priorities are. and then finding faculty. They don't have to necessarily be in Mount Vernon. It makes sense that the work be done in Northwest Washington, obviously, but have some proposals come put to the organization. And we're in the process of looking at changing the committee structure. One example is there's been what's called the PAC committee, which is really about growing cannery peas, which was the original crop that created NARF and that petitioned the university with some diseases in pea production. And that committee there's been no peas grown in the valley or in Northwest Washington for 15, 20 years now, but it's still there. So moving that into looking at that of being maybe a cover crop, maybe rotation, look at some broader issues like that. And so we're just this winter spending time trying to sort out, maybe one or two committees that are a little more integrated in agricultural production that could cross over. Research dollars are increasingly, as we heard this morning, harder and harder to come by. And so any place that we can target research that maybe is going to be benefited, that will benefit multiple different crops and commodities would be very beneficial. But it would be interesting, Tom, to talk a little more about it, because I think there is enough growers around, and it could even be a broader, there's no, the research station serves 7 counties in Northwest Washington, so it's predominantly based around that mandate, but there's plenty of examples where viruses are being evaluated, and it's work that's really being done in Salinas and things like that. So it's not exclusive to the area, but I think there's some potential there, and it wouldn't be that you would have to necessarily even have a formal organization. It could be people who are really getting together as a grower group and having those discussions as needed in terms of directing the future. We have one of the strongest things NARF has going for it. I don't know if there's any WSU faculty here, but when you receive a grant, that per dollar could be as high as 40% of every dollar goes to the university for overhead. NARF, in its wise way, it ends up 70 years ago, agreed with the university that the overhead would never go over 3%. So 97 cents of every dollar goes to the research project. And that's a pretty darn unique and good opportunity for us. So I'd be happy to talk more.
I think that's really promising. I mean, a lot of our agenda, and I think it came across this morning with Wendy at WSU and us down at the Northwest Berry Foundation, the folks up in Canada. We've got some good connections, but we don't have anything formal in place. So if we can find some starting places to cobble together fresh market strawberry resources and get them funded, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity.
I think I guess I'm too involved in just dealing with creating a transparency line through the organization at this point. But I think it would be a well-received addition to what we have right now. And I think when you look at research and the issues around research at land-grant universities, I don't think WSU is unique. But if you do not have the grower groups funding, putting money on the table, as faculty retired, they are not coming back. We need that, and it makes sense to have the main commodities grown over here play a dominant role. But there are tens or thousands of acres of other crops that are grown here that definitely help support the berry industry or the dairy industry.
Yeah, and strawberries are in a unique position in a way as having a structure in place and now almost losing it and needing to restructure rather than being an emerging crop.
Right.
We're in a unique position, but I think we should talk more about it.
The other thing I would say about that is we do have a small amount of money every year that is earmarked for emerging value-added crops. And some years we don't have a proposal, such as this year. So there's some opportunities there, and I think fresh market strawberry, not processing strawberries, but fresh market strawberries would fall into that category.
So if a grower has interest in kind of diving further into this, what are some suggestions from your end about, who to contact and how to go about it?
That's a really good question.
Oh.
Contact Tom.
I saw a finger point.
Yeah, maybe this is all happening live here, right? I'm happy to put my contact information out. I'm curious to hear more of what Tom has to say, and my guess is there's a number of other entities in the room and in the strawberry business that are connected there. But it's not complicated. If there's a group of growers that walks into the foundation and says, we got growers and we're interested in research, that's meets our mission.
So I know we have a strawberry newsletter that is part of this too, and I'll for my presentation in the next session, I'll have information about how to sign up for that. We might put like some of these details into that, and then you guys can sign up for this and then have access to that information that route, or we can also put it up on the through the Northwest Berry Foundation outlets of other dissemination.
If I could ask just one question, that is, how many people would be interested in participating on a committee like this? Oh, there we go.
That's part of the issue.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know how much time you've got, Julie, but what I would like to ask you guys is, you both are obviously dedicated to getting new growers involved in farming. How successful, I don't quite know how to word it, but how successful are you being for one thing? And I mean, that's a lot of what we're talking about right here, expanding this. It's not transferring guys who have grown processed strawberries. It's really developing that new grower group and making them successful. And I think both of you have some real good expertise in that. How does a new grower come into this, or what would you say about that? How do you make them successful?
Well, there's a lot we probably both have to say about that. I think what I would say is 40%, I think the statistic I've heard, Rob, maybe you have another number, somewhere around 40% of all new farm businesses are new entry, not people coming from farm families. They're often people, most often than not, they're college educated, sometimes with advanced degrees, sometimes second career. That's certainly the people that we get into our internship program. Very few of them have significant farm experience, but some, and they are unique in terms of or differing perspective compared to what typically how people come into the ag system. And I guess I can relate to that because I didn't come from a farm family and started growing crops here that were completely unique to Western Washington. But I think there is some really, really smart, intuitive, good business-minded people coming into ag, which I find very exciting. And they challenge every convention you can put out there, which is a challenge in a program sometimes. But I think, we track and we're 6 years into our program, but 80% of the people through our programs still work in ag. I'm going to say there's 8 or 9 of them that have purchased a farm and are actively farming. So, in some sense, you could say the number is not above 50%, but I don't think anybody in this business would think that number would be above 50% who would stay in it. And our program is about developing key employees or people wanting to go into farming for a livelihood. And the other part of that that isn't talked about all that much is those people who come into our programs, they might find out it's not for them, but they've learned how complicated and how pressure cooked agriculture is. And if they end up in policy or on a school board or a city council, those things will reap benefits as well.
Thank you. I don't know if either of you guys want to give your contact information. It'd be a good idea. I don't know who might be out here who benefits from it.
I've got a few cards with me. Be happy to give out an email address. It's long, so
Yeah.
I'll stay around for a few minutes afterwards.
Yeah, I have some cards as well, and my email is short, Rob, R-O-B, @vivafarms.org. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate the insight.